Welcome to Midnight Histories, where we explore the untold stories from the past, gently guiding you through forgotten worlds as you unwind. If you enjoy diving into historical tales and learning about the hidden struggles and triumphs of the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Tonight, we'll unravel the less peaceful side of ancient India, where caste systems, inequality, and constant struggles shaped the lives of many. Despite the teachings of peace and harmony, daily life was far more complex and harsh than you might think. Get ready to discover the hidden truths behind this fascinating history. Segment 1. Living as a lower caste in ancient India. Constant struggle. Picture, if you will, a small village in ancient India, nestled at the edge of a river, where the morning mist slowly dissolves as the sun rises over the horizon. The air is cool, still holding the dampness of the night. The streets, narrow and uneven, are lined with small, modest homes. Huts made from mud and thatched roofs, their walls adorned with simple carvings or clay pots hanging from strings. The earthy smell of damp soil fills the air, mingling with the faint scent of burning wood as early morning fires are lit, their smoke rising in delicate, curling plumes. As you walk along these streets, the village slowly awakens. The soft murmurs of a waking world drift in the air. Footsteps of those already hard at work. The clink of metal as tools are sharpened, and the rustling of animals stirring in their pens. The sounds are gentle, yet carry the weight of routine. There is no hurry in the pace, yet quiet urgency in the labor. Now, imagine standing at the edge of this scene, where those born into the lower caste begin their day. Their clothes are simple, made of coarse fabric that has been washed many times. The colors faded with use. The fabric clings to their bodies, worn thin from the constant movement, yet practical and necessary for survival. Their faces are weathered, marked by years of working under the harsh sun, the skin rough and darkened from exposure to the elements. Their hands, callous and firm, speak of endless labor, tending fields, cleaning streets, gathering waste, or carrying heavy loads. They carry with them an unspoken weariness, the result of a lifetime spent in roles dictated by birth. The village itself is a contrast of architectural simplicity and function. The homes of the lower caste people are the humblest of all, often located on the outskirts of the settlement. These homes are small and cramped, with low doors and windows barely wide enough to let in light. The roofs, thatched and fragile, sag slightly under the weight of time. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and cooking spices. The floor is uneven and covered with straw mats that provide only a thin layer of comfort. There is little decoration, only the barest necessities, pots, clay lamps, and perhaps a small shrine or idol tucked in a corner, honoring deities that bring hope to lives that seem unyielding in their struggle. The houses of higher castes, by contrast, are located in the center of the village, built with better materials, stone and brick, with elaborately carved wooden doors and spacious courtyards. The air here smells fresher, untouched by the smell of refuse, and the walkways are well maintained, unlike the uneven paths trodden by the lower caste villagers. The higher caste homes are often adorned with intricate artwork, and their surroundings are well kept, revealing a life that exists in a different world, one untouched by the hardships of daily labor. As you move through the village, you can feel the distinct divide, not just in the architecture, but in the very way people move through their environment. The upper caste individuals stroll along the cobbled streets, their fine clothes sweeping behind them as they walk. They have no need to hurry. Their faces are often proud, gazing ahead with a sense of entitlement that comes with their position. Their voices carry with ease, their words often laced with a sense of importance. For those born into the lower castes, however, the air is heavier. The very ground beneath their feet seems to remind them of their place in the world. The streets they walk are not just roads, they are boundaries, marking the limits of their existence. As they pass through the village, they are often ignored, their presence barely acknowledged. The air is thick with the weight of their invisibility. In the temples scattered throughout the village, the difference becomes even more pronounced. The towering structures with their grand spires are reserved for the higher castes, who walk freely through their courtyards, offering prayers and sacrifices. For the lower caste individuals, the temple is a distant, forbidden place. They're not allowed to enter, not allowed to touch the sacred stone. Their feet never allowed to tread where others tread. The air around these temples is different, sacred, purifying, yet off-limits to those who are deemed impure. And yet, despite this oppressive atmosphere, life continues. The lower caste individuals, though burdened by the weight of tradition, find ways to survive. They rise before the sun, work diligently under its harsh rays, and endure the daily challenges that come with their place in society. They speak little, but their actions, silent, steady, are a testament to their resilience. As you picture the scene, you begin to understand the complex layers of ancient Indian society, where life of the lower caste was defined by more than just the work they did. It was determined by who they were, by the very blood that ran through their veins. It was a life steeped in struggle, but also in quiet defiance, as those in the shadows found small ways to carve out moments of hope amidst the overwhelming reality of their existence. As the morning sun begins to rise, casting its first rays of light across the village, the atmosphere is calm and still. A faint mist lingers in the air, shrouding the dirt paths in a soft veil, and the air feels cool, tinged with the earthy scent of dew-kissed soil. Slowly, the village begins to stir, though it's far from the hustle and bustle of a modern city. Instead, there is a gentle hum of activity, muted by the quiet rhythms of rural life. The sounds of a rooster crowing in the distance and the occasional rustle of trees in the early morning breeze blend harmoniously with the low murmur of voices as the villagers begin their day. The village is a collection of mud and thatch homes, simple in their construction but sturdy in their endurance. The walls are made of dried clay and sun-baked bricks, the earthy brown color blending seamlessly with the landscape. The roofs are thatched with bundles of long grass, tightly woven to protect from rain, though time has left them sagging in some places. As you move through the streets, you can see the imperfections in the architecture, cracks in the walls and gaps in the roofs that show the wear of countless seasons. The doors are narrow wooden planks bound together with rope, and small windows peek out from the thick walls, covered with woven mats to block the harsh sun. As you walk further, you notice the stark contrast between the homes of the higher castes and those of the lower castes. The upper caste homes are larger, made of stone and brick, with ornate carvings on the doors and windows. These structures stand tall and proud, their walls gleaming in the morning light. The pathways leading to these homes are well maintained, with finely polished stones lining the edges. These are the homes of privilege, where the air feels cleaner and the morning light seems to shine brighter. In stark contrast, the homes of the lower caste are humble, often situated on the outskirts of the village, away from the main roads. Their homes are small and cramped, barely enough space to fit a family of four. The walls are thin and cracked, revealing the roughness of their construction. Some houses lean precariously, held together by the sheer will of those who reside within. There is no decorative flourish here, no intricate carvings, no painted murals. What little space they have is occupied by the barest necessities: a few clay pots, a woven basket for storing food, and perhaps a simple shrine to honor the gods. The floor is hard-packed earth, and the mats that cover are thin and worn. The air inside is heavy with the scent of wood smoke from the fire pit, where a simple meal will be cooked. The interior is dim, as the small windows let in only a trickle of light. The home is not a place of comfort or relaxation, but a shelter from the outside world, a place to sleep before the cycle begins again. Imagine a woman in her mid-30s standing at the entrance of one such home. She wears a sari made of faded, coarse cotton, the fabric rough to the touch. The sari is not bright and vibrant like those worn by women of higher status, but instead muted. Faded shades of red and brown, the color worn down from years of use. Her skin is darkened from the relentless sun, and her face is creased with lines that tell the story of years spent under its harsh gaze. Her hands are calloused, the fingers thick and strong from a lifetime of labor. Her hair, dark and thick, is pulled back into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, stray wisps falling around her forehead. Her feet are bare, the soles rough from walking barefoot on the hard, dusty paths. She walks slowly, her movements deliberate, yet marked by an underlying weariness. The weight of the day's labor already hangs heavy on her shoulders, though the sun has barely risen. She sweeps the dirt path in front of her home with a broom made from twigs, each stroke a quiet, methodical motion. The broom bristles have seen better days. Many of them are frayed, and the handle has splinters where it has been gripped countless times. As she sweeps, the dust rises in a cloud, mingling with the morning air. It's a chore she performs every day, and yet the dust seems to settle almost as soon as it's cleared. There is no true respite from the dirt. The very nature of her existence is a constant cycle of work, with little time to enjoy the fruits of her labor. Her home is silent, except for the sound of the broom against the dirt, the soft rustle of the straw mats inside as the wind blows through the cracks in the walls. Her children are still asleep inside, tucked into the corner where the mats are rolled out. They will wake soon, their small feet padding across the dirt floor, their faces still soft with the innocence of youth. But even they, at a young age, know their place in the world. They are born into a life of service, to follow in the footsteps of their parents, working the land, tending animals, doing the tasks that are seen as unclean or menial. The young girls will learn to cook, clean, and care for their families. The boys will assist their fathers in the fields or become craftsmen if they are lucky, but their fates are already sealed by the caste into which they were born. There is little room for aspiration beyond the roles set before them. The men, too, are caught in the same cycle. They rise early in the morning, their skin glistening with the dew that collects in the grass. They wear simple cloths, loose dodas wrapped around their waists, leaving their chests exposed to the sun. They are strong, their bodies hardened by years of physical labor in the fields, but their strength does little to change their position in society. The fields they work on belong to someone else, someone of higher status, who profits from the crops they tend. The land they work is not theirs to own, and even the food they grow may be taken away or sold in the market, leaving them with just enough to feed their families. As they work in the fields, the sound of their labor fill the air, the rhythmic thud of hoes striking the earth, the grunt of exertion, the murmur of conversation in a language known only to them. Their bodies move in unison, each man caught in the silent dance of agricultural life. The land is unforgiving, yet it is all they have. Their work is endless, just like the cycle of seasons that dictate their lives. The marketplace in the village is a place of commerce, but it is also a place of division. Here, the lines between the castes are most visible. The lower caste individuals are forced to stand at the edges of the marketplace, unable to approach the stalls of the wealthier traders. The finest produce, the best goods, are reserved for those who can afford to pay a higher price, and that price is determined by status, not need. The lower caste can buy only what is left over, often inferior goods, sometimes spoiled or damaged. Their presence in the marketplace is tolerated, but they are never allowed to forget their place. Even the air in the marketplace feels different, charged with a sense of exclusion. The higher caste individuals move freely, their robes sweeping across the stone floor, while the lower caste are confined to margins. As the day progresses, the village grows quieter. The sounds of commerce and labor fade, replaced by the stillness of the evening. The air cools, and the sun begins its descent toward the horizon. In the homes of the lower castes, the family gathers around the fire for the evening meal. It is simple: rice, lentils, perhaps a few vegetables. There is no luxury here, no abundance, just enough to sustain them until the next day, when the cycle will begin anew. The evening is not a time for relaxation. It is a time for more work. Cleaning the dishes, preparing for the next day's labor, and caring for children. The atmosphere inside the home is one of quiet resignation. The fire crackles softly, casting long shadows on the walls. The family speaks little, for there is nothing left to say. They know their place in the world. They have always known. But even in the quiet of the night, as the stars begin to twinkle overhead, there is a sense of defiance, however small. It lies in the quiet endurance of the lower caste people, in their refusal to let the weight of their circumstances crush their spirit. In their hearts, they may dream of a better life, but in their minds, they know that for now, survival is all that matters. As the day shifts into its later hours, the rhythms of the village remain steady, though their tone is ever so slightly changed by the quiet weight of inequality that looms like an unspoken truth over everything. The light grows softer, the shadows longer, and the village's sounds become less frequent, almost subdued, perhaps a reflection of the exhaustion that has quietly settled over the people. It is at this point in the day that the deep-rooted social divides within this community become even more evident. These divisions, visible and invisible, define the spaces the people inhabit, shaping the way they move, work, and exist in this world. The village, a simple place of existence for the lower caste individuals, feels at times like a microcosm of a larger, more imbalanced world. It's as though the architecture itself tells the story of the hierarchy that exists within it, each structure and space speaking volumes about the place that the people of different castes hold in this social order. The homes of the lower castes remain as humble as before, often clustered in a haphazard arrangement, nestled at the very edge of the settlement. These are small, unadorned, and fragile, like the lives within them. Their walls are sun-dried mud or cracked bricks, the wear of time evident on every surface. The roofs, a patchwork of thatched grass and palm leaves, sag under the weight of years and neglect. The homes have no courtyards, no open spaces where families can gather for leisure or community events. There is no space for beauty or luxury here. The houses are functional, built only to provide shelter, not comfort or warmth. The interiors are modest, often sparse, with no more than the essentials to support daily survival. Wooden planks serve as simple beds for families, covered by thin, worn-out mats made of straw or cloth. There are no luxuries, no tapestries adorning the walls, no paintings or decorative pottery. Even the tools inside the house show the marks of hard use: clay pots with cracks, cooking utensils that are dented and scratched from constant use. The floor is bare earth or rough stone, uneven and unevenly swept. It is a world where comfort is a luxury and survival is a primary focus. The simplicity of these homes and their interiors stands in sharp contrast to the grand homes of the higher castes. You can almost feel the difference as you move between the two spaces, the change in atmosphere palpable as you move from the outskirts to the central area of the village. Here, the architecture tells a very different story. The homes of the upper castes are more permanent, built with solid stone and brick, decorated with intricate carvings and pillars that stand tall and proud. The doors are made of heavy, polished wood, adorned with carvings that tell stories of myth and legend. Inside there is space, a lot of it. Courtyards stretch out before large homes, surrounded by walls and adorned with flowering plants, creating a sense of order and luxury that feels alien to the modest homes on the outskirts. The floors inside the aristocratic homes are made of smooth stone or polished wood, often covered with fine rugs imported from distant places. The air here smells fresh. There is always a scent of incense burning, or the rich aroma of food being prepared in large kitchens, far removed from the modest fires of the lower caste homes. The contrast is striking. Where the homes of the lower caste feel confined and suffocating, the homes of the wealthy feel open and expansive, a visual representation of the barriers that separate these two worlds. The people who reside within these aristocratic homes are as different from the laboring villagers as the homes themselves. As you walk through the village, you can tell immediately who belongs to which caste. The wealthy wear finer clothes, bright silks and embroidered fabrics, often in vibrant hues of red, blue, and gold. Their skin, though still touched by the sun, is not as weathered as that of the laborers. Their faces seem less burdened, marked by the privilege of power and wealth. They carry themselves with an air of assurance, their voices louder, their movements more deliberate. There's a sense of entitlement that seems to follow them, a quiet but undeniable superiority in their every step. The lower caste individuals, on the other hand, dress simply. Their clothes are plain and faded, worn from years of use. The men wear cotton dhotis, wrapped tightly around their waists. Their chests often bear the elements. The women wear plain saris, draped in simple styles, with no adornments or jewelry to mark their status. Their hair, though neatly tied back, is often unkempt and windswept. The simplicity of their appearance is a stark contrast to the elaborate adornments of the higher caste individuals. The faces of the lower caste people are often tired, their eyes heavy with the weight of life's burdens. Their movements are slower, not because of age or infirmity, but because every step is calculated, every motion tied to the exhaustion of a life spent in servitude. Despite these outward differences, however, there's one thing that binds the lower caste people together: their daily struggles. Whether they work the fields, tend to the animals, or clean the streets, their labor is constant and without end. It is backbreaking, grueling work that leaves little room for rest or respite. Their lives are shaped by their roles in the village, each one determined not by their own choices, but by the accident of their birth. The caste system dictates their place in the world, and no matter how hard they work, no matter how much they strive, they cannot rise above the roles assigned to them. The people of the lower castes work from dawn to dusk, their bodies weary from the constant toil, yet they do not rest when the sun sets. The evening hours are still filled with labor. They return home to prepare meals, to clean, to tend to the needs of their families. The women, after a long day of household chores or agricultural work, cook simple meals over open flames, the fire crackling softly in the evening air. The scent of lentils, rice, and vegetables fills the room, but it is a humble meal, enough to stave off hunger, but little more. The men, too, after working long hours in the fields, come home to care for their animals or help with the household chores. In the quiet of the evening, when the light dims and the sound of the village soften, the families of the lower castes gather together. They sit close, often in silence, the fatigue of the day weighing heavily on their bodies. The rhythm of their lives is predictable and unchanging. There is little time for conversation, for leisure, or for rest. They live within a framework of expectation, each day like the one before it, and the one before that. Yet, despite the hardships, there is a certain dignity in the way the lower caste people carry themselves. They do not speak of their suffering openly, but their resilience is evident in every movement, every quiet act of survival. They do not complain of the injustice that surrounds them, for it is simply the way things are. But there is a strength in their silence, a quiet endurance that defies the system that seeks to keep them in their place. They live their lives a sense of unspoken pride, one that comes from the knowledge that, despite the oppression they face, they continue to endure. And so, the village continues in its quiet, relentless cycle. The higher caste individuals remain in their grand homes, untouched by the daily struggles of the lower caste people. The lower caste people continue their labor, moving through their days with steady determination, knowing that their place in the world will never change. The architecture of the village tells this story of division, of inequality, of a world where those born into privilege are allowed to flourish, while those born into poverty are confined to the edges, working endlessly to survive. As the shadows of the evening stretch long across the village, the rhythm of the day slowly begins to fade, but the tension within the social structure remains. While the villagers, particularly the lower caste individuals, seek refuge and quiet their homes after a long day's work, the inequality that defines their existence never truly fades. It is woven into the fabric of their lives, like the threads of a tapestry, unchanging and deeply ingrained. It rests in the spaces between the cracks of their simple homes, in the unspoken silence that fills the corners of the rooms as families gather around the hearth. The homes of the lower castes, though humble, hold a kind of resilience. Their thick mud walls have weathered the seasons, and their roofs, sagging but still standing, have held against the rains year after year. These homes are more than just physical shelters. They are symbols of endurance, of lives lived within the unyielding boundaries of a caste system that has existed for centuries. Each room, each corner of the house, bears witness to the daily struggles of those who live within. The simple, unadorned interiors, where the earth floors are swept daily, are often marked by the passage of time and the layers of history, the silent stories of generations who have come and gone without changing their fate. Inside these homes, the evening is spent in relative quiet. The children, having finished their day's chores, sit near the fire, listening to the low hum of their parents' voices. There is no grand conversation here, no storytelling or philosophical debate. There is only the sharing of the day's work, the simple act of being together in a world that has offered them few comforts. The flickering flames cast shadows on the walls, their movements echoing the quiet rhythm of survival. The air inside is thick with the aroma of food, the simple, hearty meal of rice and lentils, flavored with the few spices that can be afforded. The family's bond is strong, as is the quiet resolve that exists among them. They may not speak of their suffering, but it is felt woven into the silence. Their lives are spent in this quiet, unrelenting cycle of work and survival. They have little, but they hold on to what they can, each other. There is an unspoken understanding that, though their fates are bound by the caste system, they still possess their humanity. This, in many ways, is their strength, the knowledge that despite everything, They continue to exist, to endure, and to pass on what little wisdom they have to the next generation. But outside the confines of their homes, the larger world continues to move. The elite, those born into privilege, are far removed from the struggles of the lower castes. Their homes, built from more durable stone and adorned with intricate carvings, are filled with luxury and comfort. The air inside their home smells of incense, and the food is rich and varied. Flavors from faraway lands mixed with the finest local produce. The residents of these grand homes are bathed in a life of ease, their days filled with leisure, ceremony, and power. The contrast between the homes of the lower castes and the aristocracy is striking. While the common folk struggle to make ends meet, the wealthy live in opulence, their walls adorned with fine tapestries, and their tables laden with exotic foods. Their homes stand tall, fortified, and beautiful, not just in architecture, but in the sense of security and permanence they provide. These homes are not just shelters. They are representations of status, power, and control over the land and people. It is a world apart from the world of the laboring class. The elite have no need to work in the fields, to labor under the sun. Their wealth is inherited and protected, passed down through generations, cementing their place in society's upper echelons. They are born into their roles as leaders, landowners, and rulers. The air around them is one of quiet superiority. Their presence in the village is commanding. They move through the streets with ease, their robes flowing behind them, their faces set with a sense of purpose that speaks of power. They are not concerned with the daily struggles of the people in the fields or the homes on the outskirts. The divisions that define society are clear and unquestioned. The caste system is their foundation, and it is one they would do anything to preserve. In this starkly divided world, the lower caste individuals find themselves not only physically separated from the elite, but also mentally and emotionally distanced. The elite live their lives on a different plane, one where the reality of labor and struggle does not touch them. Their lives are filled with security of wealth, of a position in the hierarchy that guarantees them comfort and respect. They wield power in the form of land, of wealth, and of influence. Their actions are motivated by a need to maintain their status, and they will do whatever it takes to ensure that those born into lower castes remain in their place. In the village, this inequality is not often spoken of openly. The caste system, though deeply ingrained, is a reality that no one questions. The people born into lower castes know their place in the world, and while they may dream of something different, they do not act on it. To challenge the system is to risk everything, their livelihoods, their safety, even their lives. So instead, they endure. They work hard, year after year, accepting the way of their birthright with the knowledge that it is unchangeable. They find meaning not in rising above their station, but in the daily rituals of survival, of providing for their families, of caring for their children, of passing on whatever small knowledge they can. The air in the village, as dusk settles, becomes cooler and heavier. The sound of the village, the low chatter of voices, the gentle clinking of pottery, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, create a kind of lullaby, a quiet refrain that lulls the lower caste people into their routine. They do not ask for much, but they do ask for peace. And peace for them is found not in grand revolutions, but in the quiet moments of togetherness. But there is something else that settles in the stillness of the evening, the awareness of the boundaries that confine them, the knowledge that their lives are not their own, but are governed by a system older and more powerful than any single person or family. It is a system that does not allow for change, one that ensures the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. It is a system that devalues their work, their worth, and their dignity, but still, they continue. In these quiet moments, as the sun dips below the horizon and the firelight flickers in the homes of the lower castes, there is no grand rebellion, no revolt against the social order. There is only the acceptance of reality, the quiet recognition that while their circumstances may never change, their resilience and spirit will carry them through yet another day. As the evening deepens, a profound silence blankets the village. The day's labor is done, but the weight of history, of caste and inequality, continues to hang over the village like a thick fog, unwavering and unrelenting. The simple yet significant acts of survival, the clearing of the dirt paths, the tending of fires, the cooking of modest meals, carry on in the homes of the lower castes, each one a quiet resistance against a system that seeks to define them. Yet, Even within the silence, there lies a kind of understanding, a shared recognition of the lives they lead and the reality they are bound to. It is a reality where change feels distant, but where each small act of perseverance adds to the tapestry of existence. The lower caste individuals, though isolated from the lives of the elite, are not isolated in their struggle. Theirs is a collective experience. Across the fields, the market, the narrow streets, and the confines of their small homes, there are thousands, perhaps millions, of others just like them, quietly enduring the same hardships, finding meaning not in the grand promises of the world, but in the everyday acts of survival. And while the caste system that governs their lives may seem unchangeable, like an ancient river that carves deep into the landscape, their resilience becomes a force in its own right, subtle but powerful, shaping their lives in ways that are not immediately apparent. The architecture of the village, the walls that separate homes, the doors that bar entry, the roads that curve around the higher caste dwellings, physically embodies the separation. The visual divide is stark. The central area with its polished stone buildings is filled with light and space, while the outskirts, where lower caste homes sit, are dimmer, more constrained, and less well cared for. This physical separation is a constant reminder that, in this society, geography and social status are not merely coincidental. They are tied directly to one's place in the hierarchy. Beyond the physical separation lies the psychological barrier. For the lower caste individual, the idea of rising above one's station seems an impossible dream. From childhood, they are taught to accept their place, to obey the rules set by those in power. The higher caste children grow up surrounded by opportunities, access to better food, education, and a future in which they can lead and shape the world around them. The lower caste children, by contrast, are taught to work, to serve, and to remain within the boundaries drawn by society. They know that their roles are fixed, that the opportunities available to them are limited, and that to reach beyond those limits is an act of defiance, one that could have consequences too severe to consider. And yet, within this system, there are moments of quiet rebellion. These are not dramatic acts of resistance, but subtle forms of defiance. A glance shared between two laborers as they toil side by side, a whispered conversation among the lower caste workers about their shared struggle. The very act of surviving, of continuing to live despite the oppressive system, becomes a form of resistance. They are not passive in their lives. They simply know that survival in itself is a form of strength. And it is in these moments of quiet rebellion, of persistence, that the true resilience of the lower caste individuals is found. Even in the midst of harsh daily realities, there are glimmers of light. As the sun sets and the evening stretches on, the families gather together in the dim light of their homes, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. In these moments, despite the hardships, there is still joy, small, quiet joys that arise from the simple act of being together. A mother smiles softly as she hands her children a portion of food. A father ruffles his son's hair as the boy recounts the events of the day. The younger generations, born into the same cycle, are given a chance to grow up and experience their world, with the same knowledge that survival is a key to living. They are not yet jaded by the way of the world. They are still young enough to dream, even if those dreams are small. Yet the system, though silent, is ever present. It is there in the way the lower caste people keep their heads bowed as they walk through the streets. It is there in the way they speak to the higher caste individuals, never with direct confrontation, but with a careful politeness that comes from years of subjugation. The higher caste people, who never question the roles that they inherit, move through the world with ease, while the lower caste individuals continue to shoulder the burdens of a system that sees them as less than human, less worthy of opportunity or recognition. But within this structured world, there is a glimmer of something more, a shared understanding among the lower caste that their lives, while dictated by circumstances, are still theirs. They may not have the power to change the system, but they do have the power to live within it. They find strength in their unity, in their shared experiences, and in the small moment of resistance that fill their days. The caste system, with all its oppressive weight, may define their lives, but cannot define their spirits. It cannot erase the small victories they claim in the quiet, everyday moments. Their survival is not just physical, but spiritual, a testament to the strength that lies within their hearts. And though they may never rise above their station, The endurance they show in the face of constant adversity marks their lives as something far more than what the system would have them believe. As the night deepens and the village settles into its peaceful rhythms, the sense of resignation that pervades the lives of the lower caste individuals shifts ever so slightly. The flames of the hearth continue to flicker, and in the soft glow, they find solace. They find solace in the simplicity of family, of togetherness, of survival. Though the caste system casts a long shadow over their lives, it is not enough to extinguish the small sparks of life that continue burn in their hearts. Segment 2. The Rise and Fall of Ashoka the Great, a leader who tried to change the world. The mighty Maurya Empire, one of the largest and most powerful empires in ancient India, was ruled by Emperor Ashoka, a man whose name became synonymous with transformation and tumult. From a ruthless conqueror in his youth, Ashoka would eventually evolve into a promoter of peace and one of the most enlightened figures in Indian history. But this transformation did not come easily. It was marked by internal strife, external threats, and a deep, personal reckoning that shaped the very soul of the empire. Ashoka was born in 304 BCE to King Bindusara, the second emperor of the Maurya dynasty. His family was steeped in power, as the Maurya Empire spanned across much of India, stretching from the Deccan Plateau in the south to the northern reaches of the subcontinent. His father, Bindusara, had expanded the empire, consolidating power over much of India. However, the empire's vast size presented both opportunities and challenges, and as Ashoka came of age, the ambitious young prince found himself caught in a fierce battle for the throne. The early years of Ashoka's life were defined by competition with his brothers. The throne of the Maurya Empire was highly coveted, and as Ashoka's father aged, there were many who sought to seize control. Ashoka, however, was not a prince who could be easily overlooked. Known for his ruthless ambition, Ashoka was determined to secure the throne, and he did so through acts of strategic violence and political maneuvering. Unlike his more docile brothers, Ashoka was fierce and unyielding. His leadership in battle, his brilliant tactical mind, and his willingness to take extreme measures set him apart. Despite these qualities, Ashoka's early reign was fraught with difficulties. He ascended the throne after the death of his father, but not without facing numerous internal threats. Ashoka's rise was marked by conflict and bloodshed, and his path to power was anything but peaceful. He was forced to suppress rebellions and eliminate those he saw as rivals to his rule, including some of his own brothers. His early actions as emperor were violent. He ruled with a heavy hand, relying on military might and intimidation to maintain control over the vast Maurya Empire. The conquest of Kalinga would prove to be a turning point in Ashoka's life and reign. Kalinga, located on the eastern coast of India, was a powerful and independent kingdom that lay in the path of Ashoka's expansionist ambitions. The region was rich and strategically important, and Ashoka, ever the conqueror, sought to bring it under his rule. In 261 BCE, Ashoka launched a brutal campaign against the people of Kalinga. The resulting war would be one of the bloodiest and most devastating in Indian history. The scale of the violence Ashoka unleashed during the Kalinga War was immense. The battlefields were littered with the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike, and the destruction of the kingdom was widespread. The people of Kalinga suffered greatly. Men, women, and children were killed or displaced, and the once thriving kingdom was reduced to ashes. In the aftermath of the war, Ashoka stood victorious, but the victory was hollow. The immense loss of life and the suffering he had caused weighed heavily on his conscience. It was at this moment, standing amidst the aftermath of the Kalinga War, that Ashoka experienced a profound transformation. The bloodshed, the cries of the innocent, and the devastation he had witnessed haunted him. The man who had been a ruthless conqueror began to question the very nature of his actions and the cost of power. The remorse he felt was overwhelming, and he began to seek a new path, one that would not be defined by violence but by peace and compassion. Ashoka's epiphany marked the beginning of a dramatic shift in his leadership. He turned away from the violent methods that had defined his rule and embraced a new philosophy, a philosophy based on nonviolence, respect for all living beings, and the pursuit of spiritual truth. This shift was not immediate or simple, but over time, Ashoka became deeply influenced by the teachings of Buddhism. His encounter with the principles of Buddhism led him to see the futility of war and the importance of moral conduct, compassion, and self-discipline. Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism was a public affair. He openly declared his adherence to the Buddhist faith and adopted its principles as a foundation for his governance. He was deeply moved by the teachings of the Buddha, particularly the concept of ahimsa, nonviolence, dharma, righteousness, and the importance of compassion for all beings. Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism was not just a personal transformation. It marked a new direction for the entire Maurya Empire. Under his rule, the empire would undergo a cultural and philosophical revolution, one that would leave a lasting legacy in the history of India and the world. Ashoka's commitment to Buddhism went beyond mere personal belief. It became a guiding principle for his rule. He sought to govern with justice and compassion, emphasizing the welfare of his people. One of his most notable achievements was the creation of the Edicts of Ashoka, a series of inscriptions carved into stone pillars and rocks throughout the empire. These edicts outlined his commitment to principles of dharma, offering guidance on how to live a righteous life, treat others with respect, and cultivate harmony in society. The edicts also emphasized the importance of religious tolerance, respect for elders, and the care for animals. Ashoka's efforts to spread Buddhism were far-reaching. He sent emissaries to various regions of India and beyond, spreading the teachings of the Buddha to foreign lands. His influence reached as far as Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and even Central Asia, where Buddhist missionaries carried his message of peace and nonviolence. Ashoka's patronage of Buddhism also led to construction of many stupas, Buddhist shrines, and monasteries throughout his empire, and he supported the development of Buddhist scriptures. Despite Ashoka's personal transformation and his efforts to promote peace, his reign was not without its challenges. His attempt to spread Buddhism and implement his new vision of governance were met with resistance, both within the empire and from external forces. Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism, while widely supported by many, was viewed with skepticism by some members of his court and military, who were more accustomed to the traditional methods of rule and warfare. Some of his advisors and generals, who had once fought alongside him in brutal conquests, struggled to reconcile Ashoka's new pacifist stance with the needs of an empire that still required defense and territorial control. Internally, the Maurya Empire faced significant administrative challenges during Ashoka's reign. The empire was vast and diverse, containing various cultures, languages, and religious practices. The shift to Buddhism and the implementation of Ashoka's vision of Dharma required careful management of this diversity. Ashoka had to navigate the delicate balance between promoting religious tolerance and maintaining the political unity of his empire. His efforts to enforce the principles of Dharma sometimes led to tensions with local rulers and factions who resisted Ashoka's influence. Externally, the empire faced threats from neighboring kingdoms and emerging powers. The vast borders of the Maurya Empire, particularly in the northwest, were vulnerable to invasions and incursions. Ashoka's military, once a symbol of his strength and authority, had to adapt to the changing political landscape. Despite his conversion to Buddhism and his promotion of peace, Ashoka understood that his empire still required a strong defense, and he was forced to make difficult decisions about military strategy and diplomacy. The balance between promoting peace and ensuring the security of his empire became a constant struggle for Ashoka. His commitment to Buddhism and nonviolence was not an easy path, and it required constant negotiation between his ideals and the practicalities of governance. Emperor Ashoka's reign is one of the most remarkable and paradoxical in the history of India. It was a reign that began with conquest, power, and violence, yet ended with profound commitment to peace, nonviolence, and the spread of Buddhism. This transformation did not come easily, nor was it without its challenges. For Ashoka, the journey from being a ruthless conqueror to a promoter of peace was marked by internal strife, external threats, and the difficult task of navigating the vast empire he ruled. After the brutal conquest of Kalinga, the bloodshed and suffering Ashoka witnessed became a turning point in his life. Standing on the battlefield, surrounded by the carnage of war, Ashoka experienced a profound personal transformation. The pain and devastation that followed the conquest weighed heavily on his heart. He realized the futility of war, the suffering it caused, and the emptiness of victory achieved through violence. The lives lost in Kalinga, both on his side and among the civilians, seemed meaningless to him. This was the moment when Ashoka's path began to diverge from that of a typical ruler, and he chose a path of spiritual reflection, influenced by Buddhism. As Ashoka began to adopt the principles of Buddhism, he sought to redefine his reign. Gone was the ruthless conqueror who had crushed enemies in battle. In his place emerged a leader committed to promoting peace, moral conduct, and the well-being of his people. Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism was not just a personal spiritual journey. It became the foundation of his policies and governance. His reign shifted from expansion through violence to expansion through the propagation of compassion, truth, and nonviolence. Ashoka understood that true power did not lie in conquering kingdoms, but in winning the hearts and minds of his people. The rise of Dharma and the spread of peace. Ashoka's transformation was not immediate, nor was it without resistance. At first, his conversion to Buddhism and his commitment to nonviolence may have seemed a dramatic break from traditions of war and conquest that had shaped the Maurya Empire. The empire, under his rule, had grown to be one of the largest and most powerful empires in ancient India, stretching from the Deccan Plateau in the south to the Himalayas in the north, and from the eastern Bengal region to the western Punjab region. The strength of the Maurya Empire had been built on military might, with armies holding sway over vast territories. Now, Ashoka sought to pivot away from these old methods and promote a vision of governance grounded in Buddhist ideals. One of Ashoka's most significant steps in this transformation was his commitment to the spread of Dharma, the moral and ethical code that governed all aspects of life. He sought to implement these principles across his empire, using them as a guideline for both governance and daily life. The most visible manifestation of Ashoka's efforts to spread Dharma was the creation of the Edicts of Ashoka. These edicts, inscribed on stone pillars and rock faces, were spread throughout the empire and contained instructions for moral living, justice, and compassion. The edicts focus on respect for all life, the importance of nonviolence, ahimsa, and the need for religious tolerance. Ashoka's idea of Dharma was not limited to Buddhism alone. He emphasized the importance of ethical conduct for people of all religions. His vision was a harmonious society in which people from different faiths and backgrounds could coexist peacefully. His support for religious tolerance was groundbreaking in an era when religious intolerance and conflict were common. Ashoka's policies promoted respect for all living beings, and he advocated for the humane treatment of animals, banning the slaughter of animals for royal feasts and encouraging vegetarianism. His influence was far-reaching, as his moral message resonated not just with the people of India, but also with neighboring kingdoms. In addition to his policy reforms, Ashoka became a strong patron of Buddhism, promoting it not just as a personal belief, but as a guiding principle for governance. He sent Buddhist missionaries, including his own children, to far-off lands such as Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and even parts of Central Asia, to spread the teachings of the Buddha. These efforts helped establish Buddhism as a dominant religious and philosophical force across the Indian subcontinent and beyond. Ashoka's support for construction of Buddhist stupas, monasteries, and scriptures further solidified his commitment to spreading Buddhist principles throughout his empire. Internal struggles, resistance to Ashoka's reforms. While Ashoka's transformation into a promoter of peace and Buddhism is often seen as one of his greatest achievements, his reign was not without internal resistance. Not everyone in his empire shared his new vision, and Ashoka faced significant challenges in implementing his policies. As a ruler who had once built his power through military conquest, Ashoka's shift to a pacifist and moralistic approach was met with skepticism and even opposition by some of his generals, ministers, and noblemen. Many within his court and military feared that Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism and nonviolence would weaken the empire's military strength. The Maurya Empire was built on a strong military foundation, and many of Ashoka's advisors believed that the principles of Buddhism, especially those that promoted pacifism, could not protect the empire from external threats. The military elite, who had once been the key to Ashoka's success, were now uncomfortable with the changes he sought to implement. Furthermore, Ashoka's push for religious tolerance and the promotion of Buddhism as a state religion also caused friction with the Brahmin priesthood, which held significant power and influence in the empire. The Brahmins, who were proponents of traditional religious practices, often saw Ashoka's support for Buddhism as a challenge to their own authority. Ashoka's policies of religious tolerance, while progressive, were met with resistance from those who viewed the spread of Buddhism as a threat to their own positions. Despite these challenges, Ashoka remained committed to his vision. He continued to implement reforms, focusing on the welfare of his people and ensuring that the empire adhered to the moral principles he had adopted. He organized public works, built hospitals for both humans and animals, and worked to improve the living conditions of the lower classes. His efforts to create a just and compassionate society were reflected in his efforts to regulate trade, ensure food security, and promote the well-being of his people. Ashoka's rule was marked by an increasing emphasis on social welfare and justice, which set him apart from many of his predecessors and contemporaries. External threats and challenges. While Ashoka faced significant internal resistance, he also had to contend with external threats to his empire. Despite his commitment to peace, the Maurya Empire remained vulnerable to attacks from neighboring kingdoms and foreign powers. Ashoka's decision to abandon military conquest did not mean that he could afford to neglect the defense of his empire. The borders of the Maurya Empire were vast, and its neighbors, including the Greek kingdoms to the west and the Tamil kingdoms to the south, posed ongoing threats. Ashoka's military, once a symbol of his strength, had to adapt to these external pressures. Although he did not seek to expand his empire through warfare, Ashoka still had to ensure that his empire remained secure from foreign invasions and rebellions within his territories. Ashoka's commitment to nonviolence did not mean he was blind to reality of military threats. His army was still an important part of the empire's structure, but he sought to use it defensively rather than offensively. One of the most significant external threats during Ashoka's reign came from the northwestern frontiers of his empire, where various Central Asian tribes, including the Yavnas Greeks, were encroaching upon the Maurya territories. Ashoka's diplomatic efforts in the northwest were aimed at preserving peace through alliances and negotiations rather than military force. However, the complexities of managing such a vast and diverse empire meant that Ashoka could never fully escape the military realities of his time. The Maurya Empire's military power remained crucial for maintaining stability, even if it was no longer the primary focus of Ashoka's reign. The legacy of Ashoka. Despite the internal and external struggles he faced, Ashoka's legacy is ultimately one of profound transformation. His commitment to Buddhism and the ethical principles of Dharma reshaped the social and political landscape of India. His reign marked a turning point in the history of ancient India, as it moved from an era defined by conquest and military expansion to one focused on peace, moral governance, and religious tolerance. Ashoka's legacy endures in the form of his edicts, which continue to be a source of inspiration for people seeking justice, compassion, and nonviolence. His efforts to spread Buddhism had a lasting impact not just on India, but on much of Asia, and his vision of a just, tolerant society set a standard for rulers and leaders throughout history. Though Ashoka's reign faced numerous challenges, his commitment to peace and his personal transformation from a conqueror to a compassionate leader has earned him a place among the greatest rulers in history. In the end, Ashoka's reign was defined not by the wars he fought, but by the peace he sought to create. His journey from ruthless conqueror to promoter of peace was a difficult one, fraught with internal and external challenges, but it ultimately left a legacy that continues to inspire millions across the world. The transformation of Emperor Ashoka from a fierce conqueror to a promoter of Buddhism, peace, and moral governance marked one of the most dramatic shifts in the history of ancient India. Yet, this journey was not without its struggles. As much as Ashoka sought to bring peace and compassion to his vast empire, he was confronted by both internal resistance and external threats that challenged his vision of a world founded on harmony and religious tolerance. His reign stands as a testament to both the complexities of governance and the transformative power of personal reflection and spiritual commitment. Having embraced Buddhism after the horrors of the Kalinga War, Ashoka attempted to implement his newfound philosophy not only in his personal life, but also in his governance. His shift from violence to virtue, from conquest of moral leadership, was not instantaneous or seamless. The Maurya Empire, which had flourished under his predecessors due to military prowess, was now at a crossroads. Ashoka, determined to redefine his rule, faced immense challenges in balancing his spiritual ideals with the practical needs of governing a vast and diverse empire. Ashoka's efforts to spread Buddhism. One of Ashoka's most enduring legacies was his promotion of Buddhism. Though the Maurya Empire had expanded through military conquest, Ashoka's vision of the empire's future was rooted in the teachings of the Buddha. The principles of Buddhism, nonviolence, ahimsa, compassion, and the pursuit of dharma, righteousness, became the cornerstone of his reign. Ashoka was so deeply moved by these teachings that he sought not only to practice them personally, but also to impose them as a guiding principle for his governance. Ashoka's commitment to Buddhism was multifaceted. He made public proclamations about his conversion and actively supported Buddhist communities and monasteries. His most significant contribution to the spread of Buddhism was the construction of stupas, Buddhist shrines that housed relics of the Buddha. These stupas, built throughout his empire, became symbols of both his commitment to Buddhism and his effort to spread the Buddhist teachings. Ashoka also sent Buddhist missionaries to regions beyond India, including Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and even parts of Southeast Asia, where the Buddhist message found fertile ground. The Edicts of Ashoka, a collection of inscriptions carved on stone pillars and rocks throughout the empire, further solidified his commitment to spreading Buddhism and promoting moral living. These edicts, written in multiple languages and scripts, outline Ashoka's vision for a just and compassionate society. They emphasized ethical conduct, respect for elders, tolerance of different religions, and the importance of compassion for all living beings. Ashoka's outreach extended beyond Buddhism. His policies of tolerance allowed various religious groups, Jains, Brahmins, and others, to coexist peacefully within the empire. However, Ashoka's efforts to spread Buddhism were not without resistance, both within his court and from neighboring kingdoms. His decision to embrace Buddhism and distance himself from the violent practices of his predecessors was seen by some as a threat to the established order. Many of the royal officials, military leaders, and Brahmin priests who had benefited from the old system of power and authority were suspicious of Ashoka's newfound pacifism. The traditional structures of power in the Maurya Empire, which had been built on the foundation of military strength and conquest, were deeply challenged by Ashoka's commitment to peace and nonviolence. Internal strife, the struggle for control. Ashoka's peaceful policies, while laudable in their ambition, faced considerable opposition within his own empire. The empire, vast and diverse as it was, had grown accustomed to the power dynamics of military expansion and authoritarian rule. For many in the royal court, Ashoka's new approach represented a threat to their power and privileges. The generals and military leaders who had once fought alongside Ashoka in the brutal conquest now found themselves at odds with a shift towards peace. They feared that the emperor's embrace of Buddhism would weaken the empire and render it vulnerable to both internal uprisings and external invasions. Ashoka's new policies also created tension with the powerful Brahmin priesthood, who had long held significant influence over the royal court and the empire's governance. By adopting Buddhism as a state-supported religion, Ashoka alienated the Brahmins, who viewed his actions as a direct challenge to their religious authority. Though Ashoka's policies of religious tolerance were aimed at fostering harmony between different faiths, the Brahmins, who had enjoyed a privileged position under previous rulers, were resistant to the growing influence of Buddhism. Internally, Ashoka's transformation also caused political friction. His decision to focus on the welfare of his people through the establishment of hospitals, roads, and welfare programs meant that the traditional military and political elites were sidelined. The centralization of power under Ashoka's reforms, though designed to ensure justice and compassion, led to resentment among those who had previously benefited from the existing power structures. Some of Ashoka's own family members, who were used to wielding power and wealth, found themselves at odds with his new vision. There were even reports of political intrigue and conspiracies within the royal family, as rivals sought to undermine Ashoka's policies and regain control of the empire. Despite these challenges, Ashoka remained resolute in his commitment to his newfound path. His desire to create a just and moral society, grounded in the principles of Buddhism, was unwavering. He worked tirelessly to implement reforms, building infrastructure for his people, including rest houses, wells, and public gardens, and establishing regulations that improved the lives of the lower classes. His emphasis on social welfare, justice, and morality was unprecedented and set him apart from other rulers of his time. External threats, defending the empire. While Ashoka's internal struggles were significant, external threats to the Maurya Empire were also a constant concern. The empire, which spanned much of the Indian subcontinent, was surrounded by powerful kingdoms and nomadic tribes. Ashoka's desire for peace was admirable, but it did not shield the empire from the geopolitical realities of time. The northern and northwestern borders of the Maurya Empire, in particular, were vulnerable to invasion by foreign powers, including the Greek kingdoms that had established themselves in the northwest after the conquest of Alexander the Great. These kingdoms, though weakened by internal strife, still pose a threat to Ashoka's rule. In addition to the Greek kingdoms, Ashoka's southern and eastern borders were also prone to invasions from the Tamil kingdoms and other neighboring states. The Maurya Empire's vast territories required a strong defense, and Ashoka's commitment to peace was often tested by the need to defend the empire's borders. While Ashoka's military policy shifted towards diplomacy and defensive strategies, he recognized that maintaining a strong defense was still essential. Though he refrained from further military expansion, Ashoka understood that the empire's security required careful management of its borders and the strategic use of its military. At the same time, Ashoka sought to manage these external threats through diplomatic means. He maintained correspondence with foreign rulers, including those in the Greek kingdoms, and made alliances where possible. Ashoka's foreign policy was one of peaceful coexistence, promoting trade and cultural exchange rather than conflict. His vision of a peaceful world was not one of isolation, but a cooperation, and he sought to foster relationships with neighboring kingdoms based on mutual respect and understanding. However, these diplomatic efforts were not always successful, and external threats continued to pose a challenge to the stability of the Maurya Empire. Despite Ashoka's desire for peace, the realities of maintaining such a vast empire made it difficult for him to completely avoid conflict. Nonetheless, Ashoka's efforts to balance military readiness with the pursuit of peace through diplomacy became a defining characteristic of his rule. Ashoka's legacy: peace and compassion in an imperfect world. Ashoka's reign, though marked by internal strife and external threats, left an indelible mark on Indian history. His commitment to peace, nonviolence, and Buddhism was revolutionary for its time. He succeeded in establishing an empire where the principles of dharma, moral righteousness, were central to governance. Through his edicts, Ashoka promoted values such as truth, nonviolence, respect for life, and religious tolerance. His efforts to spread Buddhism were not only influential in India, but also had a lasting impact on Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and beyond. While Ashoka's reign was not without its challenges, it is remembered as a period of great moral and spiritual significance. He transformed from a conqueror who expanded his empire through bloodshed to a ruler who sought to expand the reach of compassion and moral governance. His vision of a peaceful empire, grounded in the ideals of Buddhism, has been admired for centuries as a model of ethical leadership. Despite the difficulties he faced, both from internal resistance and external pressures, Ashoka's reign stands as a testament to the power of personal transformation and the possibility of creating a just and compassionate society, even in the face of immense challenges. His legacy continues to inspire leaders and thinkers around the world, reminding us that the pursuit of peace and righteousness can create a legacy far greater than the victories of war. Segment 3. What really happened to the Indus Valley Civilization? The Indus Valley Civilization, one of the oldest and most advanced urban societies in ancient history, continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and scholars alike. Spanning over a vast region that covered much of present-day Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan, the civilization flourished between approximately 3,300 BCE and 1300 BCE. At its peak, it was home to millions of people, a highly organized society with remarkable urban planning, sophisticated architecture, a thriving economy, and impressive technological achievements. However, despite its apparent success, the Indus Valley Civilization mysteriously collapsed, leaving behind a wealth of ruins and little understanding of why or how it came to an end. For centuries, the collapse of this once thriving civilization has remained one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Was it an external invasion, environmental catastrophe, or did internal societal factors play a key role in its demise? In this section, we will explore the possible causes behind the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization by investigating the remains of its cities, the environmental factors at play, and the societal conditions that may have contributed to its eventual downfall. The flourishing of the Indus Valley Civilization. Before we delve into the mystery of its disappearance, it is important to understand the remarkable achievements of the Indus Valley Civilization. Stretching across approximately 1.25 million square kilometers, the civilization cities, including Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dhalavira, stood as testament to the ingenuity of its people. The cities were built with a level of urban planning that was centuries ahead of its time. Streets were laid out in a grid pattern, demonstrating an understanding of geometric principles. Houses were made of baked brick, uniformly sized, and often equipped with private wells and sophisticated drainage systems. Public baths, such as the Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro, and an intricate sewer system highlight the advanced sanitation infrastructure that ensured cleanliness and hygiene, features that were rare in other contemporary ancient societies. This level of urban planning suggests a highly organized society, with a clear focus on public health and community welfare. Economically, the Indus Valley civilization was marked by trade and commerce. The civilization had extensive trade networks that spanned across the Arabian Sea to the Persian Gulf and up into Central Asia. Evidence of goods like beads, seals, and pottery found in Mesopotamia indicates that the Indus people were engaged in long-distance trade, contributing to their prosperity. Their craftsmanship was also notable, with advanced techniques in metallurgy, bead-making, and pottery. Socially, the society was likely stratified, though not as rigidly as some other ancient civilizations. The absence of ostentatious royal tombs or grandiose monuments suggests that the Indus Valley may have had a form of leadership that was less hierarchical than that of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. There was no clear evidence of large-scale warfare or palaces, which implies that the civilization may have been relatively peaceful. The uniformity in the size and construction of homes suggests a level of social equality, though some differences in wealth and status were still present. The sudden decline theories and speculation. Despite the Indus Valley success, the civilization began to decline around 1900 BCE, and by 1300 BCE, its major cities were abandoned. The reason for this decline is still the subject of debate. Many theories have emerged over the years, and while no single explanation is universally accepted, several possible factors, ranging from environmental catastrophes to societal issues, may have played a role. Environmental factors, climate change, and the river shifts. One of the most widely accepted theories regarding the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization is the role of environmental factors, particularly climate change and shifting river patterns. The region where the Indus Valley civilization thrived was heavily dependent on the Indus River and its tributaries for irrigation, trade, and sustenance. The river system provided the fertile soil necessary for agriculture, which in turn supported the city's growth. However, evidence suggests that around 1900 BCE, the climate of the region began to change dramatically. Studies of ancient lake beds, pollen samples, and sediment cores have indicated a shift towards a more arid climate. This change would have had serious consequences for agriculture, particularly the cultivation of wheat, barley, and other crops that were vital to the Indus economy. A major environmental event that could have contributed to the collapse is the shifting of the course of the Indus River itself. Over time, tectonic movements and changes in the river's course may have altered the natural water flow, disrupting irrigation systems and leaving agricultural lands barren. Some scholars believe that the river's drying up or changing course may have caused widespread crop failure, leading to food shortages and famine, which have forced the people to abandon their cities in search of better living conditions. In addition to these river shifts, some experts suggest that monsoon patterns in the region could have become less predictable, exacerbating the effects of drought and leading to a period of extreme flooding or desertification. The combination of these climatic shifts may have weakened the agricultural base of civilization, making it increasingly difficult for cities to support their growing populations. Societal factors, decline in trade, and economic stress. While environmental changes were likely a major factor in the collapse of the Indus Valley, societal and economic stress could have contributed to the weakening of the civilization as well. The Indus people were heavily reliant on long-distance trade, particularly with Mesopotamia and regions in the Persian Gulf. If the routes for trade were disrupted, either due to internal conflict, shifts in political leadership, or environmental challenges, this would have had a significant economic impact. Archaeological evidence suggests that around 1900 BCE, there was a noticeable decline in the quality and quantity of goods produced in the Indus Valley. This could reflect a decline in the craftsmanship and industrial output that had once been a hallmark of the civilization. The sudden scarcity of luxury items, like precious stones, beads, and high-quality pottery, could indicate that the trading networks had been disrupted or that the resources necessary for such industries were running low. Additionally, The decline in the availability of raw materials, such as copper and tin, may have contributed to the civilization's collapse. The Indus people were skilled metalworkers, and without access to these crucial materials, their ability to maintain their advanced infrastructure, including tools and weapons, would have been compromised. The disappearance of the Indus script also provides a clue to the internal struggles the civilization may have faced. The script, which has not been fully deciphered, appears to have been used for trade, administration, and communication. However, as the civilization declined, the script disappeared as well, suggesting a breakdown in administrative systems and a loss of institutional continuity. Potential invasions and external factors. Another theory that has been proposed is that the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization could have been caused by invasions or external conflicts. This theory suggests that nomadic tribes or foreign invaders may have attacked and destroyed the cities. Some have speculated that the Aryan migration into the Indian subcontinent around 1500 BC could have played a role in the decline of the Indus cities. However, there is limited archaeological evidence to support the idea of large-scale invasions. The remains of the Indus cities show no signs of violent destruction typical of invasions, such as a widespread burning of buildings or the presence of weapons in large quantities. Instead, many of the abandoned sites show signs of gradual decline, with some buildings left in a state of disrepair over time. This suggests that internal factors, such as economic hardship or environmental stress, might have been more significant in the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization than any single external invasion. Still, it is possible that external pressures, whether through trade disruption, conflict, or climate change that affected surrounding regions, could have added to the destabilization of the civilization. Gradual abandonment, the fate of the cities. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization appears to have been a gradual process, rather than a sudden collapse. Many of the major cities, including Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were abandoned over time, but not in a single catastrophic event. Archaeological evidence suggests that, as the agricultural base weakened and trade dwindled, the people may have moved away from the urban centers to smaller, more rural settlements, possibly in search of more reliable water sources and fertile land. Mohenjo-Daro, for example, shows signs of gradual abandonment, with a slow deterioration of its infrastructure, including the drainage system, which was once one of the most advanced in the ancient world. The decline in urban planning and maintenance suggests that the once centralized power of the Indus Valley had fragmented, and the people were no longer able to maintain their impressive cities. As the population dwindled and the cities were abandoned, the once thriving civilization faded into obscurity. The reasons for this decline were undoubtedly multifaceted, involving a combination of environmental, societal, and perhaps even political factors. Yet, despite the best efforts of modern archaeologists, the exact cause of the civilization's collapse remains elusive. The remains of the Indus Valley cities, buried beneath the sands of time, continue to hold their secrets, an enduring mystery that invites us to ponder the fragility of even the most advanced and seemingly invincible societies. The Indus Valley civilization, with its advanced urban planning, sophisticated technology, and intricate trade networks, was a beacon of early civilization in the ancient world. However, despite its impressive achievements, the civilization mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and countless unanswered questions. In this part, we will continue to investigate the remains of the cities and the possible environmental and societal factors that could have led to the civilization's decline. The archaeological remains, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the primary sources of evidence for understanding the rise and fall of the Indus Valley civilization, come from its remains, chiefly its cities. Among the most famous of these cities are Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, both of which were large, well-planned urban centers at the heart of the Indus Valley. The ruins of these cities have provided us with valuable insights into the daily lives of their inhabitants, their social structure, their economic activities, and their eventual decline. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the most extensively excavated sites, is often cited as the archetype of Indus Valley urban planning. The city was meticulously laid out in a grid pattern, with streets intersecting at right angles. The buildings were constructed with uniform baked bricks, and many homes had private wells, demonstrating an early understanding of urban sanitation and water management. Public bathhouses, particularly the Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro, indicate a society that prioritized cleanliness and communal activities. Despite these advancements, the site also reveals signs of gradual decline. The city's once advanced drainage system, which was unparalleled in the ancient world, began to deteriorate. Over time, the Great Bath lost its significance, and the infrastructure began to crumble. This suggests that, while the city was originally a symbol of efficiency and order, it began to suffer from neglect, possibly due to economic or social strain. Harappa, another major city of the Indus Valley civilization, shares many of these features. Like Mohenjo-daro, it was well planned, with wide streets, public baths, and a highly developed system of water management. However, evidence from Harappa suggests that it was subject to a gradual decline, possibly due to similar factors that affected Mohenjo-daro. Archaeologists have discovered signs of shifting cultural patterns and abandonment in certain areas, which indicate a societal breakdown before the eventual collapse of the urban centers. While the ruins of these cities give us a glimpse into the past, they also raise important questions. What caused these cities, which were once thriving hubs of commerce, culture, and innovation, to fall into decay? Why were their advanced systems of urban planning and water management not enough to sustain the civilizations? To answer these questions, we must examine the environmental, societal, and economic factors that could have contributed to their decline. Environmental changes. The impact of climate shifts. One of the most widely discussed factors in the decline of the Indus Valley civilization is the role of environmental change. The civilization thrived in an area that relied heavily on the Indus River and its tributaries for irrigation, trade, and sustenance. The river's annual flooding brought fertility to the surrounding land, enabling the cultivation of crops like wheat, barley, and cotton. However, as climate patterns changed around 1900 BC, the region's environmental stability began to deteriorate. Paleoclimatic data, derived from studies of lake sediments, pollen samples, and ancient riverbeds, suggests that the region experienced significant climate change around this time. The once reliable monsoon patterns, which brought regular rains to the Indus Valley, began to shift, leading to a period of drought and irregular rainfall. This change in precipitation would have significantly affected agriculture, as the water levels of the Indus River and its tributaries began to fluctuate, making irrigation systems less effective. Furthermore, evidence from archaeological sites has shown signs of drought, with a noticeable decline in agricultural output. The reduced water supply would have severely impacted the food supply, and it is possible that crop failures became more frequent, leading to widespread famine. This would have created immense stress on the population, leading many to abandon their cities in search of more fertile lands. In addition to drought, there is evidence that tectonic activity played a role in the civilization's decline. Studies of ancient riverbeds suggest that earthquakes or other seismic events may have altered the course of the Indus River or caused it to dry up in certain regions. The river's changing course would have disrupted the complex irrigation systems that sustain agriculture, leading to further environmental strain. The shifting of river channels, coupled with the diminishing water supply, could have contributed to the collapse of the agricultural base of civilization, pushing its inhabitants to migrate or abandon their cities altogether. Societal factors, decline in trade and economic strain. While environmental changes likely played a critical role in the decline of the Indus Valley civilization, societal and economic factors were also significant contributors. The Indus Valley economy was heavily reliant on trade, both within the empire and with external partners. Trade routes extended from the Indus cities to Mesopotamia, Persia, and Central Asia, with goods such as beads, textiles, and metals flowing through these networks. The civilization's prosperity was, in part, due to its ability to engage in this extensive trade, which brought wealth and resources into the region. However, archaeological evidence suggests that by 1900 BC, the trade networks that had once sustained the Indus cities began to break down. The decline in trade could have been caused by several factors, including the weakening of internal political structures, the shifting of river routes, or the disruption of external trade due to regional conflicts. This economic decline would have reduced the flow of resources into the cities, leading to shortages of essential materials and a breakdown in the once thriving urban economy. The lack of luxury goods and the decline in the quality of manufactured items found in the archaeological record suggests that the Indus people were no longer able to sustain the level of craftsmanship and industrial output that had once marked their civilization. The loss of trade and resources could have led to economic hardship, as cities could no longer support their populations in the same way. As resources became scarcer, social tensions may have risen, further contributing to the fragmentation of the civilization. Additionally, the gradual decline in urban planning and the collapse of administrative structures suggests that the Indus Valley may have experienced a weakening of centralized control. Without a strong central authority to maintain the infrastructure, enforce laws, and coordinate resources, the cities may have become increasingly chaotic, with factions competing for limited resources. This lack of governance may have accelerated the decline, as people abandoned the cities in search of better opportunities or more stable environments. Internal conflict and the breakdown of social order. While evidence of external invasions is minimal, there are hints that internal conflict and the breakdown of social order may have played a role in the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization. The uniformity in the size and construction of houses in the cities suggests a relatively egalitarian society, but as the civilization began to face economic and environmental pressures, social divisions may have deepened. Archaeological findings show that in the later stages of the civilization, there was a decline in the uniformity of urban construction. Some areas show signs of neglect, with houses left in disrepair or abandoned altogether. The collapse of the once impressive infrastructure, particularly the drainage systems, suggests that the societal cohesion that had once allowed the civilization to thrive was breaking down. As food and water became scarce, social tensions could have escalated, leading to conflict within the cities. Moreover, there is evidence of a shift in the types of goods being produced and traded. The decline in production of luxury goods, such as intricate pottery and high-quality beads, may indicate a shift away from the economic systems that had once supported the urban elite. With fewer resources available, there was less incentive to maintain the urban lifestyle, and many people may have migrated to rural areas, where agricultural opportunities were still viable. The gradual abandonment of the cities over time suggests a population that was forced to adapt to a changing world. The decline of urban centers, the breakdown of trade networks, and the weakening of political structures likely created a society that was fragmented and unstable. As people left the cities, they may have returned to smaller, more isolated agricultural communities, where survival was more dependent on local resources and on the complex trade and social systems that had once sustained the civilization. The final disappearance, a gradual collapse. Unlike the dramatic falls of other ancient civilizations, the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization seems to have been a more gradual process. Rather than a sudden invasion or cataclysmic event, the civilization appears to have experienced a slow and steady decline. The shifting climate, the decline in agricultural productivity, the breakdown of trade, and the internal pressures caused by social fragmentation all contributed to the eventual abandonment of the cities. The cities of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and others did not fall in a single catastrophic event. Instead, their inhabitants seem to have slowly left, moving to new areas, abandoning their homes, and leaving behind the once thriving urban centers to become overgrown with the sands of time. By the time the Indus Valley civilization disappeared, it had become a shadow of its former self. Its people dispersed, its cities abandoned, and its grand achievements lost to history. As we continue to explore the mystery of the Indus Valley civilization's decline, it becomes clear that its disappearance was not the result of a singular event. Rather, it was a complex process driven by a combination of environmental, societal, and economic factors, compounded by internal and external stresses. While the cities of the Indus Valley were eventually abandoned, their legacy endures in the archaeological record, revealing a civilization that was far ahead of its time. In this part of our investigation, we will explore the lasting impact of the Indus Valley civilization and consider how its decline shaped future societies, both in India and beyond. The architectural and technological achievements of the Indus Valley. Before delving into broader consequences of the civilization's decline, it is important to recognize the extraordinary achievements of the Indus Valley people. The ruins of their cities, including Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dhalavira, provide us with invaluable insights into their highly organized and advanced urban society. The cities themselves were marvels of urban planning. The well-laid-out grid system of streets, the carefully arranged residential blocks, and the advanced drainage systems demonstrate a highly efficient approach to city building. The Indus Valley civilization is often noted for its impressive infrastructure, including public baths, sophisticated water management systems, and well-constructed buildings. Mohenjo-Daro, for example, boasted one of the world's first complex sewage and drainage systems, with underground drains running through the streets, connected to each house, and designed to channel waste away from the urban centers. These innovations indicate that the people of the Indus Valley had an advanced understanding of hygiene and urban sanitation, long before similar practices were developed in other parts of the world. Moreover, the Indus Valley civilization excelled in the craft of metallurgy, pottery, bead making, and textile production. The cities were thriving centers of trade, with goods such as copper, gold, and semi-precious stones being exchanged across vast networks that stretched to Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. Evidence of seals, often made from soapstone and intricately carved with symbols, suggests that the people of the Indus Valley used these to mark goods for trade, indicating a highly organized and commercially vibrant society. Despite the collapse of the cities, the technological and architectural knowledge of the Indus Valley would have influenced subsequent civilizations in the region, especially in terms of urban planning and water management. The ruins of these ancient cities continue to inspire modern-day urban planners and architects, serving as a testament to the ingenuity and sophistication of the Indus people. The decline of the civilization and its causes. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in ancient history. While environmental, societal, and economic factors all likely contributed to collapse, the exact sequence of events remains elusive. Several theories, based on the archaeological evidence and climatic data, have emerged to explain the fall of this once thriving civilization. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the changing climate played a crucial role in the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. Evidence of a shift in monsoon patterns around 1900 BCE suggests that the region became drier and less conducive to agriculture. The weakening of the monsoon rains would have led to crop failures, food shortages, and widespread famine, putting immense strain on the population. This is corroborated by the archaeological record, which shows a decrease in the quality and quantity of agricultural goods found in the cities during the final phases of the civilization. The Indus River, which was the lifeblood of the civilization, may also have undergone significant changes. Research has shown that the river's course shifted over time, which have disrupted the water supply and irrigation systems that the civilization depended on for agriculture. As the river dried up or changed its course, many of the settlements located along its banks would have been forced to abandon their cities in search of more reliable sources of water. Additionally, tectonic activity may have played a role in the changing course of the Indus River. Earthquakes, floods, and other seismic events could have altered the landscape, making the once fertile land uninhabitable. The evidence for tectonic movements in the region is compelling, with geological surveys indicating that some parts of the Indus Valley were raised or lowered due to seismic activity, which may have contributed to the destruction of key urban centers. Societal and economic stress. In addition to environmental challenges, the Indus Valley civilization faced significant societal and economic stresses. The decline in agricultural productivity, coupled with the breakdown of trade networks, likely exacerbated social tensions. The decline in the availability of luxury goods, such as high-quality pottery, beads, and textiles, may have signaled a breakdown in the sophisticated craft industries that had once been central to the economy. As trade routes became less reliable, both due to climatic changes and possible disruptions from neighboring peoples, the economy of the Indus Valley would have suffered. The decline in trade could have led to a shortage of essential resources, including raw materials needed for industries like metallurgy and bead making. This would have further weakened the economic foundation of the cities, making them less able to support their populations. The increasing social stress caused by economic hardship could have led to internal conflict, further hastening the collapse of urban centers. The lack of centralized authority or political unity in the later stages of the civilization may have made it difficult to manage these challenges. Unlike other ancient civilizations, where powerful leaders maintained control through military strength, the Indus Valley seems to have relied more on decentralized governance. The gradual breakdown of this decentralized system may have contributed to the abandonment of cities, as people sought more stable living conditions in smaller rural communities. The role of migration and societal fragmentation. As the Indus Valley civilization declined, it is likely that many of its people migrated to new areas in search of better living conditions. The migration of populations, possibly driven by environmental stress and the collapse of local economies, may have led to the fragmentation of the once unified society. This societal fragmentation could have weakened the collective identity of the Indus people, making it harder for them to maintain the urban centers. Some evidence from archaeological sites suggests that people moved away from the cities and settled in smaller, more rural communities. These communities, though less advanced than the urban centers of the Indus Valley, may have been more resilient in the face of environmental and economic challenges. As the larger cities were abandoned, these smaller settlements could have provided the necessary resources to support the surviving population. However, this migration would also have had negative consequences. The movement of people away from the cities likely disrupted the complex trade and social networks that had once sustained the civilization. As the population fragmented, the cultural and technological knowledge that had made the Indus Valley so advanced may have been lost or diluted. Over time, the once great cities of the Indus Valley fell into ruins, and the civilization's influence on the wider world began to fade. Theories of invasion and conflict. Another theory that has been suggested for the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization is the possibility of invasion or conflict with external groups. Some scholars have proposed that the Aryans, a group of Indo-European-speaking nomads, may have played a role in the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. According to this theory, the Aryans may have migrated into the region from the northwest, bringing with them new technologies, cultures, and military tactics that disrupted the existing social and political systems of the Indus people. However, the evidence for large-scale invasion or violent conflict is limited. The archaeological record from the Indus Valley shows no signs of widespread destruction or warfare, unlike other ancient civilizations where invasions led to dramatic changes in the material culture. The lack of evidence for military conquest or external aggression suggests that the decline of the Indus Valley civilization was likely the result of internal factors rather than external invasion. Instead of a single catastrophic event, the collapse of the Indus Valley appears to have been a more gradual process, driven by the confluence of environmental, economic, and social factors. The eventual abandonment of the cities was likely a response to the cumulative stresses of these factors, as people sought new opportunities elsewhere. The lasting legacy of the Indus Valley civilization. Despite the civilization's eventual disappearance, the legacy of the Indus Valley lives on. The advanced urban planning, sophisticated technologies, and trade networks established by the people of the Indus Valley laid the foundation for later civilizations in the Indian subcontinent and beyond. The Indus script, although still undeciphered, offers clues about the civilization's social and economic organization, and its influence can be seen in the material culture of later societies in South Asia. In terms of urban planning and water management, the Indus Valley civilization had a profound influence on subsequent cultures. The advanced drainage systems, water reservoirs, and grid-patterned streets became a model for later cities in India. Even today, some aspect of Indus Valley urban planning are visible in the layout of modern cities in the region. The Indus Valley also left a legacy in terms of its craftsmanship and technological innovations. The quality of the jewelry, pottery, and metalwork produced by the Indus people set a high standard for craftsmanship in the ancient world. These skills were likely passed down through generations, influencing later artisans in the region. Though the civilization itself disappeared, the influence of the Indus Valley civilization can still be seen in the rich cultural heritage of South Asia today. Segment 4. The life of a Maurya aristocrat, power and privilege. Ancient Indian society, particularly during the Maurya Empire, was marked by a stark contrast between the lives of the elite and those of the common people. While peasants and lower caste individuals struggled to survive in the face of harsh conditions, the aristocracy lived in relative luxury, with access to privileges, wealth, and power that were unimaginable for the majority of the population. The Maurya Empire, at its height, was one of the largest and most powerful empires in the ancient world, stretching across much of the Indian subcontinent. It was an empire founded on military might, economic prosperity, and intricate political structures, with the aristocracy sitting at the very top of this complex social hierarchy. In this section, we will explore the lives of the Maurya aristocracy, delving into their politics, luxury, and the power dynamics that shaped ancient Indian society. Political power and social hierarchies. The political structure of the Maurya Empire was highly centralized, with the emperor at its apex. Ashoka, the most famous Maurya ruler, represented the pinnacle of power. His reign, though focused on spreading peace and Buddhism, still rested on a rigid social and political hierarchy. The aristocracy, which consisted of nobles, high-ranking military officers, landowners, and royal officials, played a central role in maintaining this structure. The aristocrats of the Maurya Empire were not just wealthy landowners or traders. They were also the political elites who wielded significant power within the empire. Many of them held high-ranking positions within the imperial administration, working directly for the emperor. They controlled large swathes of land, managed trade routes, and oversaw various military and political activities in the empire's provinces. As a result, they were the decision-makers who shaped the policies and direction of the empire. The aristocracy's power was further solidified through marriage alliances, political patronage, and strategic appointments to key positions. Marriages between noble families were often used as a way to solidify power and maintain control over regions of the empire. These alliances helped ensure that the aristocratic families remained at the center of political life, with the emperor relying on them to maintain order and stability across the vast Maurya territories. Despite Ashoka's shift toward promoting peace, the political environment within the aristocracy remained deeply hierarchical. The Maurya Empire was built on a structure that relied heavily on the aristocracy's loyalty to the emperor and the central authority. Aristocrats enjoyed significant autonomy in the regions they governed, but they were always bound by their loyalty to the emperor, who was considered to be the divine ruler of the empire. While Ashoka's reign saw a reduction in violence and a greater emphasis on moral governance, the core of the empire's political structure remained firmly entrenched in the elite's hands, luxury and wealth. While the lower classes faced daily struggles to meet their basic needs, the Maurya aristocracy lived lives of extraordinary luxury. Their wealth was derived from land ownership, taxation, and trade, and they used their resources to build lavish homes, maintain large households, and indulge in the finest goods available in the ancient world. Aristocratic homes, often palatial in design, were built with the finest materials, including stone, wood, and imported textiles. These homes were typically larger than the modest dwellings of the common people, often featuring spacious courtyards, decorated rooms, and numerous servants to attend to the needs of the family. The wealth of the aristocracy also manifested in the accumulation of luxury goods. Aristocrats had access to fine clothing, jewelry, and artworks that were unavailable to the lower classes. The clothing of the aristocracy was made from expensive fabrics like silk and cotton, often adorned with intricate embroidery and fine patterns. Jewelry, such as gold and silver ornaments, was worn as a sign of status, with some aristocrats wearing elaborate necklaces, rings, and earrings. These luxury items were often imported from distant lands, showcasing the extensive trade networks that flourished under the Maurya Empire. In addition to material wealth, the aristocracy had access to the best food and entertainment. Banquets were common among the elite, where exotic foods, such as fruits, meats, and sweets, were served in abundance. These feasts were often accompanied by performances, including music, dance, and poetry, providing entertainment and a means to display wealth and sophistication. The aristocrats also had access to fine furnishings and decorations for their homes. Elaborate carpets, wooden furniture, and painted walls adorned their residences, making them centers of comfort and luxury. These homes served not just as living spaces, but as status symbols, demonstrating the wealth and power that the aristocracy held within the Maurya Empire. The aristocracy's role in military power. The Maurya aristocracy was deeply intertwined with the empire's military system. Many aristocrats were high-ranking military officers who controlled large armies and played critical roles in maintaining the empire's power. During the reign of Ashoka, however, there was a noticeable shift in the military focus from expansion through conquest to defense of the empire and the promotion of internal peace. Despite Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism and his efforts to reduce warfare, The military remained a crucial institution for the aristocracy, both as a source of power and a means of securing their position within the empire. Aristocratic families often had their own private armies, made up of soldiers who were loyal to them. These private forces were typically used to maintain order in their respective territories and protect their wealth and influence. The aristocracy's control over military resources gave them significant leverage in the empire's politics, as they could raise armies to defend their interests or challenge the authority of the emperor if necessary. However, Ashoka's push for a more peaceful society meant that the military's role in politics began to diminish. Under Ashoka, the emphasis shifted away from territorial conquest and towards the promotion of social welfare, public works, and the moral governance of the empire. Despite this, the aristocracy's role in maintaining the empire's stability and enforcing the emperor's policies remained crucial. The loyalty of the aristocrats, particularly their military support, was a key component in Ashoka's ability to govern such a vast empire. The power dynamics, control, and influence. While the Maurya aristocracy thrived, it did so within a delicate web of political power dynamics. The aristocrats' position was dependent not only on their own wealth and military power, but also on their relationship with the emperor. The emperor, though often revered as a divine figure, relied heavily on the support of the aristocracy to maintain control over the empire. In return for their loyalty, aristocrats were granted land, power, and influence in the regions they governed. This system of patronage and reward meant that the loyalty of the aristocracy was paramount. The emperor's ability to maintain control over the empire was largely dependent on his ability to keep the aristocratic class satisfied. Aristocrats who felt slighted or overlooked by the emperor could potentially challenge his authority, leading to rebellion or civil strife. This balance of power between the emperor and the aristocracy was delicate, and any shift in the loyalty of the elite could have serious consequences for stability of the empire. The political power of the aristocracy was also influenced by their ability to manage the resources and populations within their regions. Aristocrats who controlled vital trade routes, agricultural lands, or mining operations wielded significant influence. Their control over these resources allowed them to enrich themselves and gain greater political leverage, not only within the empire, but also in relation to neighboring kingdoms and powers. While the emperor had the final say in matters of governance, the influence of the aristocracy could not be underestimated. The elite class had a great deal of autonomy in their local territories, and their support was crucial for the effective functioning of the empire. In many ways, the power of the aristocracy and the emperor were symbiotic, each relying on the other to maintain stability and prosperity. Aristocratic culture and identity. The culture of the Maurya aristocracy was one of refinement, luxury, and conspicuous consumption. Aristocrats were not only patrons of fine art, literature, and performance, but also actively involved in the intellectual and religious life of the empire. Many aristocratic families were patrons of Buddhist monasteries and scholars, contributing to the spread of Buddhist teachings across the empire. The support of religious institutions not only reflected the spiritual concerns of the aristocracy, but also helped to solidify their position within the broader societal framework. Buddhism, which Ashoka embraced and promoted during his reign, played a significant role in shaping the cultural life of the Maurya aristocracy. While many aristocrats continued to practice the traditional religious rituals of the Vedic tradition, the growing influence of Buddhism offered them a new avenue for spiritual engagement. Buddhist teachings on moral conduct, nonviolence, and social responsibility resonated with many members of the elite, who sought to integrate these values into their governance and personal lives. The aristocracy also played a key role in shaping the cultural landscape of the Maurya Empire. Aristocratic patrons commissioned construction of temples, stupas, and public works, leaving a lasting legacy of art and architecture that would influence future generations. These cultural artifacts served as symbols of the aristocracy's wealth, power, and devotion to their religious and social responsibilities. While the peasants of the Maurya Empire faced daily struggles of survival, battling with environmental hardships, economic instability, and societal restrictions, the aristocracy lived lives that were as different as night and day. These elites, made up of nobles, military officers, high-ranking bureaucrats, and royal advisors, wielded considerable power, amassed wealth, and indulged in luxury beyond the reach of the majority. But the opulence of the aristocracy came at a significant cost. especially for the peasant class, who supported the empire through their labor and resources. In this section, we will examine the relationship between the ruling elite and the common people, as well as the power dynamics that shaped ancient Indian society, the aristocratic elite and their political power. The aristocrats of the Maurya Empire played a pivotal role in the political life of the empire. As members of the imperial court or provincial governors, they were the chief administrators and military leaders, responsible for upholding the emperor's policies and maintaining control over their respective territories. The Maurya Empire was highly centralized under rulers like Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka, but the elite still wielded substantial influence within the system. They were the emperor's inner circle, those who shaped the direction of the empire and ensured the enforcement of his laws. These political elites were often rewarded with large tracts of land and considerable wealth in exchange for their loyalty to the emperor. This patronage system created a close-knit bond between the aristocracy and the monarchy, with the elites acting as a stabilizing force in the empire. For example, provincial governors, military leaders, and royal advisors maintained their power through their service to the emperor and their ability to manage the resources of their regions. The political power of the aristocracy, however, did not come without tensions. The relationship between the emperor and his elite was often one of mutual dependence, but also one fraught with power struggles. While the emperor's role was central to the Maurya Empire, the aristocrats had considerable influence, especially in regions distant from the capital. These regional elites often had their own armies, wealth, and autonomy, making it difficult for the emperor to impose central control. This dynamic required careful management by the monarch, especially in an empire as vast as the Mauryas. The aristocrats' role in the military and the economy. The Maurya aristocracy was deeply connected to the military apparatus of the empire. As high-ranking military officers, aristocrats were responsible for maintaining the empire's security and ensuring the defense of its borders. During the reign of Ashoka, the empire had a well-organized army, and military service was often seen as a way for aristocrats to gain prestige and political favor. Aristocratic families often held hereditary military positions, passed down from father to son. These military leaders commanded large armies and controlled significant portions of the empire's territory. The aristocracy's control over military power gave them a certain level of independence and influence, which was crucial in an empire that spanned such vast and diverse regions. However, the military's prominence did not always align with Ashoka's vision of peace and nonviolence, as the army's role in maintaining security and suppressing uprisings remained important throughout his reign. Economically, the aristocracy played a central role in the empire's prosperity. Aristocrats controlled land, trade routes, and markets, and their wealth was largely built on agricultural production and commercial exchange. They owned vast estates worked by peasants, who cultivated crops for both local consumption and export. The relationship between the aristocracy and the peasantry was one of extraction. Peasants worked the land, paid taxes, and provided labor for the elites, who reaped the benefits of their hard work. Aristocrats had access to luxury goods, including exotic spices, silks, and other materials traded from distant lands. Their homes were filled with imported textiles, fine jewelry, and intricate art. They hosted grand feasts, which served as both social events and displays of power. For the aristocracy, wealth was not just a means of comfort, but a way to maintain status and influence within society. Their lavish lifestyles were carefully constructed to demonstrate their superiority over the lower classes. The vast divide between aristocrats and peasants. The peasant of the Maurya Empire, on the other hand, lived lives defined by hard labor and limited opportunities. For the majority of people in the empire, survival was a daily struggle. Agriculture formed the backbone of the economy, and peasants worked long hours in the fields, cultivating crops like wheat, barley, and millet, often under the watchful eyes of aristocratic landowners. These peasants were subject to the whims of nature, as well as the burdens of taxation and forced labor. The taxes imposed on peasants were often heavy, and failure to meet these demands could lead to punishment or the confiscation of land. The wealth generated from their labor often benefited the aristocrats, with little to no benefit to peasants themselves. In addition to the taxes, peasants were often required to provide goods and services to the aristocracy, further reinforcing the power imbalance between the two classes. Peasants lived in small, modest dwellings, usually made from mud or thatch. These homes were simple, with very little in terms of furnishings or luxury. In contrast to the ornate palaces and mansions of the aristocracy, peasants were left to eke out a living with basic resources. Their diet primarily consisted of grains, lentils, and vegetables with little variety or luxury. Unlike the aristocrats, who enjoyed feasts and extravagant banquets, peasants rarely had access to meat or fine food. Life for the common people was harsh, and their existence was tied to the land and their ability to meet the demands of the ruling elite. The Maurya aristocracy, with its wealth and power, created a stark divide between the rich and the poor, perpetuating a system that kept the common people in a state of dependency. The luxury of aristocratic life, art, architecture, and leisure. The Maurya aristocracy's access to luxury was not limited to material wealth. It extended to art, architecture, and leisure activities. Aristocratic families were patrons of the arts, commissioning elaborate works of sculpture, pottery, and architecture to adorn their homes and public spaces. They built grand palaces, temples, and gardens, creating spaces that symbolized their status and affluence. These structures, often adorned with intricate carvings and frescoes, were designed not only for functionality, but to showcase the power and wealth of their owners. The Maurya aristocracy also enjoyed a wide range of leisure activities, from hunting and sports to performances of music, dance, and drama. Hunting, in particular, was a popular pastime among the elite. Aristocrats often kept large hunting grounds and employed teams of servants and animals to help them pursue game. This activity, besides serving as entertainment, also demonstrated the aristocrats' power and control over nature. The lifestyle of the aristocracy was deeply tied to their sense of identity and the need to display their wealth and power. Every aspect of their lives, from their homes to their clothing to their leisure activities, was designed to reinforce their position at the top of the social hierarchy. By showcasing their wealth and sophistication, they maintained their place as the ruling class, separated from the struggles and hardships of the common people. The aristocracy and social hierarchies, the caste system, the power and privilege of the Maurya aristocracy were also deeply embedded within the caste system, which formed the social fabric of ancient Indian society. The caste system was a rigid hierarchical structure that divided society into distinct groups, or varnas, based on birth, occupation, and social status. The aristocracy, typically belonging to the higher castes, enjoyed rights and privileges that were denied to the lower castes. Within the caste system, the Brahmins, priests, and scholars, Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, and Vaishyas, merchants and landowners, occupied the upper echelons, while the Shudras, laborers, and the Dalits, formerly known as untouchables, were relegated to the lower rungs. The Maurya aristocracy, composed primarily of Kshatriyas, wielded significant power within this structure. Their position at the top of the caste hierarchy gave them not only political power, but also social status, allowing them to dictate the terms of life for those beneath them. The caste system reinforced the power dynamics in ancient Indian society by ensuring that the aristocracy remained at the top. While the lower caste struggled with poverty and social mobility, the aristocrats maintained their dominance through both social and economic means. Their role within the caste system allowed them to control the resources, wealth, and labor of the common people, perpetuating the divide between the elite and the masses. The decline of the aristocracy, challenges to power. Despite their immense power, the Maurya aristocracy's position was not guaranteed. Over time, internal and external pressures began to challenge their dominance. As the empire became more centralized under rulers like Ashoka, the aristocracy's influence began to wane. Ashoka's reforms, which sought to promote moral governance and religious tolerance, reduced the power of the traditional military elite. The aristocracy's role in maintaining order and enforcing the emperor's policies shifted, as the emperor increasingly relied on bureaucrats and officials who were not necessarily drawn from aristocratic families. Additionally, the decline of the Maurya Empire itself, particularly after Ashoka's death, contributed to the weakening of the aristocracy. The empire's vast territories became harder to govern, and regional elites began to assert their independence. The breakdown of centralized control gave rise to local power centers, where aristocrats could rule with increasing autonomy. The decline of the empire led to the erosion of aristocratic privilege, as former power structures were replaced by new political realities. While the Maurya aristocracy once flourished at the height of the empire, the political and social structures that allowed them to thrive gradually began to fracture, especially after the reign of Ashoka. In this section, we will explore how the decline of the Maurya Empire contributed to the erosion of the aristocratic elite's power, how their political influence diminished over time, and how shifting power dynamics impacted the social order. The aristocracy's once unquestioned dominance gave way to new social, political, and economic realities, forcing them to adapt in ways that would shape the future of ancient Indian society. The decline of the Maurya Empire. Following the death of Ashoka in 232 BCE, the Maurya Empire began to experience significant political instability. Ashoka had implemented numerous reforms, including promoting peace, tolerance, and moral governance based on Buddhist teachings. These reforms, however, had a long-term impact on the traditional power structures that the aristocracy had relied upon. Ashoka's focus on moral leadership and the reduction of militaristic expansion diminished the central role that the aristocracy had played in governing through military means. The Maurya aristocracy had once been deeply intertwined with the military and imperial politics, commanding respect and authority through their control over land, trade, and regional governance. However, as the empire fractured in the wake of Ashoka's death, the aristocratic class struggled to maintain their influence. After Ashoka, his successors faced difficulties in managing the sprawling empire, with the territories becoming increasingly decentralized. Without the strong central leadership provided by Ashoka, local aristocrats and military leaders began to assert more autonomy. This decentralization weakened the power of the imperial court, and aristocratic families, who had once been loyal servants of the emperor, found themselves in competition for control over the regions they governed. This competition often led to internal conflicts, weakening the aristocracy's unity and allowing for the rise of local kingdoms. By the mid-2nd century BCE, the Maurya Empire had effectively fragmented into smaller, more independent states, regional aristocracies, and the emergence of local powers. With the collapse of the central authority of the Maurya Empire, regional aristocrats and military leaders became more powerful. The centralized administrative system that had once coordinated the empire's vast territories fell apart, and local leaders were left to govern their regions with increasing autonomy. These regional aristocrats capitalized on the instability, seizing power in various parts of former Maurya Empire, including in northern India, the Deccan Plateau, and the Northwest. The decentralization of power meant that the aristocracy no longer had to answer directly to the emperor. Instead, local elites had more control over their respective territories, with their own armies, revenue systems, and political structures. The shift away from a unified empire allowed these regional powers to flourish, as aristocrats in the provinces could use their wealth, land, and military resources to solidify their positions as regional rulers. One notable example of this decentralization is the rise of the Shunga dynasty in the north, which emerged around 185 BCE after the fall of the Mauryas. The Shungas were likely former Mauryan aristocrats or military leaders who seized power in the wake of the empire's collapse. As the power of the central Mauryan court weakened, the aristocrats found themselves with increased opportunities to consolidate power at a regional level, signaling the decline of centralized authority. Additionally, as regional aristocrats grew in power, they often adopted a more localized form of governance. While the Maurya Empire had maintained a unified system, the decline in central control meant that aristocrats had to focus more on managing their territories, forging alliances, and maintaining peace through military strength. In some cases, they governed with a greater degree of independence, allowing them to challenge the old structures of power that had once united the empire. The aristocracy's relationship with trade and economic resources. As the empire weakened, the economic systems that had supported the aristocracy also began to shift. Under the Mauryas, the elites had controlled vast trade networks that stretched across the subcontinent and beyond, bringing in wealth from other parts of Asia and the Middle East. This included goods such as textiles, metals, and spices, which were traded through well-established routes. Aristocrats were heavily involved in managing trade, overseeing collection taxes, and controlling vital resources like land and water. However, as the empire fractured and local kingdoms emerged, the once centralized trade routes were disrupted. New political boundaries meant that the aristocracy no longer had exclusive access to the vast wealth that had once flowed freely throughout the empire. Regional power struggles, combined with shifting trade patterns, caused economic instability. The aristocracy's reliance on trade for their wealth meant that they were vulnerable to these disruptions. As access to vital trade routes became less certain, aristocratic families had to adapt to a changing economic landscape. The shift away from a centralized economy also meant that land ownership, once a key source of power for the aristocracy, became increasingly important at the local level. Aristocratic families who controlled fertile agricultural land were able to maintain their wealth. But many of the traditional landowners found themselves struggling to keep up with the changing dynamics. Those who adapted to the changing political environment and maintained control over key agricultural resources were better able to preserve their wealth and power. Conversely, those who failed to adapt to the changing economic conditions saw their fortunes decline, further fragmenting the aristocracy. The aristocracy and cultural shifts. While the aristocracy's power waned politically and economically after the decline of the Maurya Empire, it continued to play a key role in cultural and religious life. Aristocrats, particularly those who had once been aligned with the Mauryan state, increasingly became patrons of Buddhism, a religion that had gained prominence during Ashoka's reign. However, it is important to note that despite Ashoka's promotion of Buddhism, the aristocracy's patronage of the religion was often driven by pragmatic concerns as much as spiritual ones. The support of Buddhist monasteries, scholars, and missionaries helped the aristocracy maintain their influence over the growing Buddhist population. As a result, aristocratic families were able to align themselves with the new religious order, consolidating their political and social power. Buddhism, with its emphasis on nonviolence, tolerance, and moral governance, resonated with the aristocracy, especially as it allowed them to maintain their status within a changing political environment. Many aristocratic families funded the construction of Buddhist stupas, monasteries, and institutions, further cementing their role as benefactors of culture and religion. However, not all aristocrats fully embraced Buddhism. Some continued to adhere to the traditional Vedic religious practices that had been central to the early Maurya rulers. This tension between the Vedic tradition and the rising influence of Buddhism played a key role in shaping the cultural and religious dynamics of post-Mauryan India. Over time, a more complex religious landscape emerged, with aristocrats supporting a wide range of beliefs, from Brahmanical Hinduism to Jainism and Buddhism. This period also saw the rise of powerful religious figures who could challenge the aristocracy's cultural and political control. While the aristocracy had traditionally used religion to reinforce its authority, the rise of new religious movements, particularly those associated with the spread of Buddhism and Jainism, shifted the balance of power. These movements provided alternative sources of authority and legitimacy that sometimes rivaled the aristocracy's influence. Religious institutions, particularly monasteries, began to play an increasingly important role in political life, further diminishing the aristocracy's dominance. Aristocratic decline and the transition to the post-Mauryan era. As the Maurya Empire crumbled and the political landscape shifted, the role of the aristocracy in ancient India began to decline. The shift towards regionalism, the breakdown of trade networks, and the diminishing power of central authority all contributed to the erosion of the aristocratic class's influence. Many aristocrats lost their grip on power as local kings and rulers emerged, often from the lower or middle classes, and began to challenge the established elite. The post-Mauryan period saw the rise of a new set of power structures. Dynasties like the Shungas and Satavahanas began to emerge, further fragmenting the once unified political and social systems of the Maurya Empire. While the aristocracy's political and economic dominance waned, many aristocratic families still held significant land, wealth, and cultural influence in their regions. These families began to shift their focus from political power to economic survival and cultural patronage. Despite the erosion of their political power, the aristocracy's cultural and social influence continued to shape the development of ancient Indian society. Many of the cultural traditions, religious practices, and artistic achievements of the Maurya period were preserved and adapted by the elites of the post-Mauryan period. The arts, architecture, and religious scholarship that flourished during the Maurya Empire continue to have a lasting impact. with aristocratic families still playing a key role as patrons of culture and religion. The aristocracy of the Maurya Empire once thrived as the embodiment of political power, luxury, and wealth, while the lower classes, especially peasants, struggled to meet their basic needs. However, as the empire entered its decline, the power dynamics within the empire began to shift, and the aristocracy found itself facing new challenges. This section explores how the changing political and social landscape in the post-Mauryan period reshaped the aristocratic class, and how their former privileges were gradually eroded. By examining this transition, we gain insight into how power and privilege in ancient Indian society evolved over time, marking an era and the beginning of a new political order. The transition from centralized power to regional control. The Maurya Empire, at its height, was a unified political entity with a highly centralized government. The emperor wielded supreme power, supported by a loyal aristocracy that controlled vast territories and resources. Aristocrats acted as regional governors, military commanders, and royal advisors, and they played a crucial role in maintaining the stability of the empire. However, after Ashoka's reign, the Maurya Empire began to fragment, leading to the decline of centralized authority and the rise of regional power centers. The fall of the Mauryas marked the beginning of a shift from a unified empire to a more fragmented political landscape, with local rulers and aristocrats asserting more control over their regions. Ashoka's death in 232 BCE left a power vacuum, and the empire gradually splintered into smaller kingdoms, each ruled by local elites. These regional aristocrats began to form their own alliances and exert authority in ways that were not always aligned with the central authority of the emperor. The fragmentation of the Maurya Empire weakened the aristocracy's connection to the central government. As the imperial power diminished, so did the political influence of the aristocracy. Formerly loyal aristocrats who had served the emperor now began to operate with increasing autonomy, controlling their local territories with little interference from the weakened imperial administration. This decentralization of power allowed the aristocrats to thrive in their regions, but also contributed to the decline of the Maurya Empire as the unity and cohesion of the once vast empire began to unravel. The loss of aristocratic privileges, economic challenges, and social change. As the political landscape shifted, the aristocracy faced significant economic challenges. The centralization of trade, resources, and wealth under the Mauryas had allowed the elite to flourish, but as the empire fragmented, access to these resources became less reliable. Trade routes, once thriving under the empire's expansive reach, began to shrink as regional conflicts and political fragmentation made travel and commerce more difficult. Without the empire's unifying control over trade and commerce, the aristocracy's wealth was no longer as easily accessible. Aristocrats who had once controlled vast tracts of land and resources now had to deal with the collapse of many of the established systems of revenue collection, taxation, and the organization of labor, which had once been strictly regulated by the central government, became more chaotic and decentralized. In many regions, local rulers replaced the Maurya administration, and they implemented their own systems of taxation and resource management. The absence of a unified economic system meant that aristocrats no longer enjoyed the same level of wealth and luxury that they had during the height of the empire. As the aristocracy's economic foundations weakened, the lower classes faced increasing hardship. Peasants, who had always lived under control of the elite, now found themselves subject to more localized and arbitrary rule. The absence of centralized power meant that local rulers and aristocrats could exploit peasants with fewer constraints. Taxation became more onerous, and the pressure on the agricultural labor force increased. Many peasants were forced into debt, and some were even subjected to bonded labor, providing the aristocracy with cheap labor to maintain their estates. In addition to economic challenges, social dynamics began to shift as well. With the decline of the Maurya Empire, the rigid structure of social hierarchy began to break down. While the caste system remained a dominant feature of Indian society, new power structures began to emerge as local rulers and aristocrats vied for control. The aristocracy's previously unquestioned authority was now being challenged by rising local powers and new political systems. This created a more fluid social order, where opportunities for social mobility, though still limited, became slightly more accessible to those outside the traditional aristocratic elite. the aristocracy's cultural influence and patronage. Despite the challenges faced by the aristocracy, many continue to play a key role in shaping the cultural landscape of ancient India. Aristocrats had long been patrons of the arts, literature, and religion, and this tradition continued even as their political power waned. While the Maurya Empire had seen a flourishing of Buddhist art and architecture, the post-Mauryan period saw an expansion of religious diversity, including continued support of Brahmanism, early Hinduism, and Jainism by various elites. The decline of the Maurya Empire did not mark the end of aristocratic patronage of Buddhism. Many aristocratic families continued to support Buddhist monasteries, scholars, and missionaries, funding the construction of stupas and other religious buildings. The support of Buddhism remained a key avenue for maintaining social status and demonstrating moral virtue in a time of political uncertainty. As Buddhism spread throughout India and beyond, aristocratic families in regions such as Gandhar and Mathura continue to contribute to flourishing of Buddhist art and scholarship. At the same time, the aristocracy's relationship with Brahmanism also deepened. While Ashoka's reign had seen a decline in the influence of the Brahmins, the post-Mauryan period saw a resurgence of Brahmanical power, particularly as the new local rulers sought to legitimize their authority through religious and cultural patronage. Many aristocrats and regional rulers began to sponsor Hindu temples and promote Vedic rituals, contributing to the cultural and religious revival of Brahmanism in the centuries following the Maurya Empire. This period also saw the emergence of new forms of art, literature, and architecture. The aristocracy's patronage of these cultural developments helped preserve the traditions of the past, while also facilitating the creation of new regional styles. Sculptures, murals, and architectural innovations from this period demonstrate a blend of regional influences and ancient Indian traditions, resulting in a vibrant and diverse cultural legacy. The rise of new powers, the decline of the aristocracy's political influence. As the Maurya Empire fragmented, the aristocracy's political dominance gradually faded. Local rulers, many of whom had been aristocratic families under the Mauryas, began to assert their independence. The Shunga dynasty, which rose to power in northern India around 185 BCE, was a direct result of the weakening of the Maurya state. While the Shungas were likely descendants of aristocratic families or military leaders, their rise to power marked the beginning of a new political order, in which regional kings rather than imperial bureaucrats held the reins of authority. The collapse of the Mauryan administrative system allowed new political entities to emerge, and these smaller kingdoms were often ruled by local elites who had risen to prominence through military conquest or political maneuvering. As these new rulers began to consolidate power, the former aristocracy found themselves sidelined, with their once privileged positions being replaced by new political structures. The rise of the Shungas and other regional powers effectively ended the dominance of the aristocratic class, who had once been integral to the empire's function. In the centuries that followed, new dynasties such as the Kushans and the Guptas would emerge, each representing a shift in the political and cultural landscape. While aristocrats still retained some wealth and influence, their power had diminished considerably, and the political framework of ancient India became more fragmented and decentralized. The traditional aristocratic class, which had once been at the heart of political and cultural life, now found itself replaced by new rulers and power structures that were more flexible and adaptive to the changing times. The aristocracy's legacy, cultural and social contributions. Despite the decline in political power, the aristocracy's legacy in ancient Indian society continued to influence future generations. Aristocrats have played a central role in the development of art, architecture, literature, and religion, and their patronage of these fields ensured that these cultural traditions endured long after political systems that had supported them had collapsed. The cultural contributions of the aristocracy also had lasting effects on the development of Indian civilization. Many of the religious texts, artistic traditions, and architectural innovations that emerged during the Maurya and post-Maurya periods were made possible by aristocratic patronage. These cultural artifacts became the foundation for later Indian dynasties and rulers, who continued to draw on the legacy of the earlier aristocracy to legitimize their power and influence. Furthermore, the shifts in the power dynamics between the aristocracy and emerging regional rulers set the stage for the political developments of medieval India. The rise of local rulers. the emergence of new trade routes, and the increasing importance of religion and culture in political life all played a role in shaping the political landscape of India for centuries to come.